Welcome to Cognitive Science 200. This is a kind of continuation, actually, of the series that I started last year called Neuroenigmas. We really did have a good time, I think, last year in the seminar, because the idea was to get people who specialize in certain topics, but to tell us frankly and honestly what it is that we really don't yet understand about the field, and to kind of depict those areas where research needs to be done, the kinds of things that we would really like to know. And so that's really motivated the series of talks that we'll have this time. So I'm going to start off today by talking about an issue that probably affects all of us, and that's the issue of free will. Now, before I do that, I want to introduce Roger Bingham and sort of explain what all of this is about. Very briefly, Roger, along with Terry Sinofsky, has started something truly wonderful, and that is the Science Network. And they have a number of projects for the Science Network, and they webcast lots and lots of wonderful material, including the material from the very recent two-day meeting called Beyond Belief, which had to do with the tensions between science and religion. And Roger has then a variety of projects, because he's very creative. And one of the projects he calls the preservation of endangered species. And what he observed last year in attending the Neuroenigmas talks was that a number of faculty really kind of bared their souls in a way that they normally wouldn't. And that this would be a wonderful thing to have on tape and to capture. So we're beginning today to tape the first of this series, and it's slightly awkward for a number of reasons. One is I really like to be able to see you, and I can't really, especially, you know, it's like a bloody black hole over there. So I can't really see anybody there. And I also have this very unfortunate habit, which is that I move about. And so the guy who's with the lights will have a tendency to get anxious over there. So there may be a certain amount of anxiety racket, CRF racket over there. And the other thing is that I really do want the seminars to be interactive. I want you to ask lots of questions. I don't care whether you think they're stupid or not. I don't care whether you think they're off the wall or not. This is the sort of seminar where you really do get to ask those kinds of things that are, you know, nagging at you and bothering you, and that normally you might only ask in the context of a bar and one or two vodkas. So I really do want you to, I want to encourage you to be very open and comfortable and easy and interactive. And that's also a little bit hard when you've got the lights and the camera and so forth. But you'll get used to that. But Roger will ask, I think, that if you want to raise a question, and I do mean that you should interrupt me. Anyhow, thank you, Roger, and it is an experiment, and we'll just see how it goes. So I put this first slide up because I want to really convey a little bit about the background of the problem. And the background of the problem is that you can't kind of isolate the issue of free will from a whole lot of other issues in the way that you might, for example, isolate the notion of combustion from a whole lot of other issues and then try to investigate it. And that's because we care about free will for social reasons. It's because we are social animals that we have a particular take on the issue of responsibility, and it's really in the context of responsibility and assessing and judging responsibility with a view to changing behavior that we care very much about the notion of free will. Consequently, what we are going to focus on is something that's approximately in here, which means that there are issues from anthropology, from comparative biology, developmental psychology on the one hand. Social neuroscience has begun to study the nature of decision-making at the single cell level, as well as planning, the nature of social attachment and how bonds are formed and what exactly are the circuits that mediate that sort of behavior, the nature of aggression and cooperation and trust and so on. So obviously there's a real synergy between these areas. But then, of course, there are the issues of legislation and the criminal justice system. And so we want to understand in the deepest way possible, informed by science, the conditions under which we ought to excuse someone from, for example, violent behavior. And if they have a tendency to violent behavior, but we need to excuse them, we still need to address the issue of social safety. And so it's very complicated, and these things intertwine with one another. Now, despite all those complications, I'm going to try to sort of wade in here and be as clear as I can. But there will be many things that you will know that I don't. And there will also be perspectives and take on these problems that you will have that I don't. And that's one of the reasons why I really want to encourage you to speak up and to let me know how you see things or what else you understand that perhaps I have missed. So, what is the story, shall we say, about free will? What exactly is the issue? What's going on? And I'm going to start from a fairly sort of simple place. I think probably I have to preface much of what I say with the phrase "to a first approximation." So just assume that in most of what I say, that phrase is there. That way I won't have to repeat it. But to a first approximation, we collectively, not just in the academy, but we and the folks in our culture, have certain kinds of background assumptions about free will. And we have a certain view about how it is that we make decisions and choices. It seems that apparently there is a sequence of events. I deliberate, a decision is made, and I act. And the word I, of course, is very important in this. It's that I consider the options. I choose, I intend, I act. Now, some folk psychological / philosophical ideas about this are that I create those choices. It is a kind of act of creation. And that I or my will operates independently of physical causes in the brain. That when I choose to have a drink of water, that it isn't that I am compelled to or that the causal flow of events in the brain brings that about. It's that it's created by me, this choice. We also sort of have the view that if it weren't like that, if there weren't this sort of causal vacuum within which I exercise my will, that I would be like unto a puppet, where I don't really have any choices, I could not do otherwise, I am being manipulated. I may do a dance, but of course that dance is all a function of the causal relations between the controller and me. Now, we kind of buy into that, but we also kind of don't. And I think especially those of you who work in the brain and behavioral sciences, you really are very uneasy about the whole folk psychological framework for thinking about these things. And so let's just remind ourselves about the kind of background materialist considerations that we bring to our science. For all we can tell now, and we know quite a lot, there is no brain-independent thing that thinks and feels, that makes decisions, that creates choices. There is just the physical brain. It's conceivable, but it seems empirically highly improbable that there is some